Bruchim Habayim, we are continuing on Shulchan Aruch or Chaim, the Hilchot Shabbat that we started, Chelek Gimel of Mishna Berura, and we are starting now the second daf on Hilchot Shabbat, Siman Resh Mim Gimel, which starts really the sugya of dealing with a non-Jew on Shabbat when you are doing business together. You have, for instance, a merchatz, a public bathhouse that you own, but you want to rent it to a non-Jew. So in order, a preface to this is, in order for such a thing to be mutar, you have to meet three different elements of heter. One is that the schirut that you do, the renting that you do, has to be in a allowed manner. In other words, you cannot rent the place on a day-to-day thing. It has to be in a way that the rental itself is mutar. And secondly, it has to be in a way that doesn't have marit ayin. That means to an onlooker, it doesn't look like a Jew that's the owner is renting this or operating this merchatz on Shabbat. And three, perhaps, it should be in a way that you're not telling the non-Jew to work on Shabbat. You're not telling him beferush that I want you to work on Shabbat. Those are the three elements that has to be met for it to be mutar. One is that, again, you can't hire him as a worker. You're renting the business completely to him. And secondly, you can't look like it is your operation that's open on Shabbat. And thirdly, it has to be in a way that you're not directly commanding him, telling him to be working on Shabbat. But going through the Sif, details of each one of these three items are going to be discussed and clarified. Shulchan Aruch writes, "Lo yaskir adam merchatz shelo le'eno Yehudi." You should not rent your bathhouse to a Gentile, mipeneh shenikra al shemo, because the bathhouse is called under your name. This is Reuben's bathhouse. The nature of a bathhouse in such way that people attribute it to the owner. So if it's known that this is the Goldstein bathhouse, and then it's operating on Shabbat, every passerby says, oh, I thought we were Shabbat. Look at what they're doing. And that will become a problem. You have a non-Jew that's working in something that's known to be the Jews, and it becomes a problem. The stam merchas lavra risuta, because normally a merchas is not given to a person by percentages of the work that they do and the money that they make. Usually it's rented on day-to-day basis. And therefore, people will think that all of the proceeds is going to the Jew. And he has hired a worker, the non-Jew, to operate the place on Shabbat. That's how people would view it, because that's how the bathhouses would operate back in the day. People would not rent the entire business, they would hire workers. So if you see an operational bathhouse on Shabbat, you say, well, look, this Reuben guy has hired workers to work on Shabbat. So he's operating his business on Shabbat, and these are his workers working for him. Versus, no, he's rented the entire thing, and the goy is the owner of the business now, and he is working his business on Shabbat. People will think that the goy is working for the Jew by his command, but a field will be mutar. In other words, even if people know that this is the Goldstein field, and now you see workers working on the field on Shabbat, you're not going to say, oh, well, he has hired these workers to work for him, because it was very much common that people would rent their the fields, and the renter would do whatever he would want to do it. And therefore, if you see some worker working on Shabbat, the immediate thing that comes to your mind is not that Reuben is working on Shabbat, but rather he has rented the field, and the renter is doing whatever he wants to do there. Sheken derech lekabel sadeh ba'arisut, a goy would accept or a gardener, a person that would work with agricultural system, would rent not rent really, would accept a field be'arisut. That means I take care of this sadeh, I take care of everything from A to Z, and I take percentage. So now I'm working for myself. I don't care about you. You're not paying me per day. You're not paying me per hour. I take from what I make a certain percentage. And that will be mutar because now I am operating for myself. I'm not working for you. I want to work on Shabbat for myself because I make more money when I work on Shabbat. And that would be mutar. And it's not marit ayin. It's not going to be misunderstood because that was the common way to deal with land when you had fields. You take somebody that would take care of it A to Z, and he would care about it because he would have a percentage at the end of the day. Even though that people know that this land belongs to the Jew, still would be mutar. Because omrim, they would think, well, it's true that the goy has taken this, accepted this land, ba'arisut, on percentage, of it, and therefore he is working for his own good. He's not working per hour or per day for the Jew. He's not a worker for the Jew, but rather he's working to develop his own money because he gets a percentage from whatever the land makes. V'tanur dino kemerchatz. V'rechaim, says the Shulchan Aruch, everything that is rented really depends on, it's very subjective, depends on what is accepted in the society. So for instance, tanur is kemerchatz. Back in the day, if you had a commercial tanur, an oven, people didn't have their own ovens always. They would rent an oven when they needed to bake. So the way they would do it would be per day. It would not be that you rent my oven and go do your own thing with it. It would be per day, per hour, whatever it was. So if the tanur of Yisraeli is working on Shabbat, that sounds like he has rented it for the day, and that's a problem, of course. So that would be like merchas. But even if it's not portable tanur, if you take a look at the mefarshim over here, it could be portable, that you give it out, but mostly is talking about a tanur that's stationary, that people know this is Reuben's tanur, right? And if you pass by on the way home from the shul on Shabbat and you see smoke coming up from the chimney, so then you know somebody is doing Chilul Shabbat over here, and the tanur that belongs to Reuben and should not really be working on Shabbat. But rechaim, but a mill is like sadeh, because mill, people would rent it for projects, right? The guy has a field, he wants to grind all of the things that he has, a seasonal thing. He would rent it for a period, or he would be partner with the Jew, and so on and so forth. He would have his own benefit from doing it, and therefore he would, he would be adata de nafshe avid. People know that the rentals of rechaim, of mill, is like that, and therefore there's no problem with the actual rental. There's no problem of marit ayin to be misunderstood, and hence you're good to go. Now, of course, we have to translate, and we will translate these things to our terminology of a person that is dealing with real estate, right? So you want to buy a house. Let's say you're flipping a house, or you are in construction. You're building a house from scratch, right? So what exactly will be mutar? What's asur? Can I have workers working on Shabbat over there? Well, it's not so simple, because if it's something that's always done by contractors, and you are completely removed from that, so then technically it could be mutar, technically, because everyone that passes by and says, oh, wait a second, this is Reuben's house, and the workers are on Shabbat working here. Well, what's going on here? People will know, well, the contractor is working for himself, because he has no, this is not a job that you hire workers. This is a job that is a contractor would have subcontractors working for him, and therefore the Jew is not even involved with this, right? On the other hand, maybe when something is mechubar lekarka and is inside the tchum, maybe it's not so simple. Maybe it's not so pashut. So that's something that we have to discuss, and we will, B'ezrat Hashem, get to the details of this as we develop it. But the Ruma writes on this Seif Aleph, even if it's not a percentage, if it's not like 30%, 25% of the proceeds that goes to the goy, it's not a 50-50, it's just a 25% that he gets. A cut is not an even cut. The majority still is going to the Jew, and he's getting a sliver of the benefits. Right? That the Jew is benefiting directly from what the goy is doing on Shabbat, because again, if he works on Shabbat, he'll make more money. Right? If you work 7 days versus 6 days, you'll make a quicker deal, right? You'll flip the house quicker, or whatever it is. The merchatz that his merchatz will be a problem, but the rechaim that he has, or the field that he has, it will make more proceeds, and therefore the Jew is taking a percentage of that. So the Jew ends up making more money by the goy working on Shabbat. Still will be mutar, says the Rama. Why? Because the goy does not care about the Jew. He wants to work for himself, because he also makes the 25 or 30% or 50% of the money that is grossed in the business, and therefore he's working 100% for himself. He wants more money for himself. He's working hard. Therefore, it's mutar. Again, as long as you meet all those 3 boxes are checked, that the rental by itself halachic is fine, there's no marit ayin, and you're not telling him to work on Shabbat. Now, let's begin understanding this a little bit deeper. Says the Mishnah Berura, when you have a merchatz, when you have a public bathhouse, it doesn't make a difference if the Jew built it or just bought it, and bought it long enough ago that people know this is Goldstein bathhouse. This is a Jewish-owned business. Because says the Mishnah Berura, Midina shari laskiro lenu Yehudi l'shana or lechodesh. Halachically speaking, will be no problem if you have a bathhouse and you say for a whole year it's yours. I get a set amount of money. You give me, $50,000, and it's yours. You can do whatever you want with it. That, technically speaking, will be mutar. I'm renting something to a Jew, to a goy, and I'm completely out of the business. Now, the owner of the business for the next 12 months is the goy. So technically speaking, in halachot of Shabbat, I am completely nistalek, I'm completely removed from this business. But at the same time, says the Mishnah Berura, the problem would be only the marit ayin that people see and think that this is my business open on Shabbat. That doesn't matter, halachically speaking, if the goy works on Shabbat, he's putting the fire on Shabbat to heat up the water, or is not. All of that would be for the Yehudi, because all the revach, the entire proceed goes to the goy, because I already rented it for a whole year. And there's no isur of schar Shabbat. I'm not working on Shabbat. I am not benefiting from Shabbat. That's another thing that we're going to discuss in the course of this Siman. For a Jew, is asur to get schar Shabbat, right? To get schar Shabbat for a Jew is asur. Therefore, to pay schar Shabbat is not asur. So therefore, you could have a non-Jewish maid that you pay them for Shabbat hourly, even. There's no problem with that, as long as they're keeping within the halachot of what they could do and what they can't do in the Jewish house. You could have a maid on Shabbat, but you can't hire a babysitter, a Jewish babysitter on Shabbat, and pay them per hour, because it's a problem of them charging schar Shabbat. A Jew cannot charge schar Shabbat, and therefore it becomes asur for you to pay that schar Shabbat, not because for you is asur to pay, but because for them is asur to take. Now, what's the problem? We do this all the time. Like all the shuls that have, childcare, they're paying per hour to these girls that are working on Shabbat, or to the person that's running the project on Shabbat. When you hire a Baal Tokea for Rosh Hashanah, you're paying him to come and blow the shofar, right? When you have a Baal Koreh on Shabbat, you're paying him to read the Torah on Shabbat. When you pay a Chazan, you're paying him to be the Chazan on Shabbat. So how is that mutar between Jew and Jew? So the halacha is, for reasons beyond the scope of today's talk, but we'll get to actually discuss this and explain it at length. But in short, is because of a concept called havla'ah, that it is asur to charge for Shabbat when you are charging only for Shabbat. But if your charge is Shabbat mixed together with other days, for instance, you tell the Baal Tokeh, he says, look, I want you to really prepare from before Rosh Hashanah. I'm paying you for everything. I'm paying you for a package of all the hours of preparation that you put in to do a flawless round of tekiyot, and of course the tekiyot themselves. I'm paying you for all of that, X amount of dollars. For Chazan, I want you to practice Chazanut. Even if you're world-class Chazan, I want you to every Shabbat practice from before and come prepared. Or if you are a childcare program in the shul, I want you to prepare the parasha and come with projects prepared from before. I want you to spend the time to preparing yourself from before Shabbat. And I'm paying you not just for the hour that you're there on Shabbat, I'm paying you for the experience of having you prepare from before Shabbat, come and present on Shabbat, and that package deal will be mutar. This is coming from the Tshuva of Rabbi Yehuda, discussing payment for a woman that goes to mikveh on Shabbat. How can a mikveh charge for the services when on Friday night a woman goes to mikveh? How can you charge for that? You are charging schar Shabbat, right? And again, the Berura basically says, because this is a havla, it's not just the experience of mikveh that you're charging for, this soap that you're providing, this towel that you're providing. There are all the goods that are there, and those goods are not a service, but that rather they are a sale. There's some part of what you use is sale is mutar, right? If you're charging for goods that you gave as a sale, that you could charge for. If somebody used something of yours on Shabbat, and after Shabbat they want to pay for what they used, that's mutar. There's no problem with that. And therefore, you have a mutar part of this charge. Out of the $36 that they pay, maybe $10 of it is for the things that they used, right? The soap that they use, the shampoo that they use, the conditioner that they use, and the towel, and then there's the part that's service. Service would be asur to charge for, because they're not putting anything of their own, you're not spending anything necessarily, and when it's mixed with the expenditure of the things that are viewed halachically as sale, then the package would be mutar to charge for. So again, that becomes part and parcel of this. So says the Mishnah Berura, let's finish this up for today's Mishnah Berura. But dafka k'shmaskiro l'shana or lechodesh. It's only when you are renting it for a year or for a month. Aval lehaskira leno Yehudi leyamim. But if you're doing it for days, then it will be a problem. Sheiten lo hayno Yehudi kol yom v'yom sheyasikenu kach v'kach. If you say every day that you operate my merchatz, I charge you $100. Then it becomes a problem, because now if he doesn't Shabbat, he's paying you for Shabbat, and that, of course, is a serious issue, because then you're charging for Shabbat. And if he does for Shabbat, you benefit. If he doesn't do for Shabbat, you don't benefit. That becomes a problem. That's the first element that we mentioned, problem. That means it's a problem with the structure of the deal. That by itself is an issue. Even though that the guy still is working for himself when he lights the fire on Shabbat and he's operating the merchatz on Shabbat, still is doing it for himself. but will still be a problem. Mikol makom midina asur. Halachically, that would be asur. Dehevek is schar Shabbat. You're not charging schar Shabbat over here. V'ayin lekaman b'siman Reshmem Dalet. This will be discussed at length in the next Siman in Shulchan Aruch. Now we're doing Reshmem Gimel. In the next Siman Reshmem Dalet is where we're going to discuss this. That the davar da asur mipnei marit ayin eno asur ela betoch hatechum shel yishuv. But if something does not have a problem intrinsically, the only problem is marit ayin, that people will look at and say, "Whoa, he's working on Shabbat," then that problem does not apply chutz latechum. Outside of a tchum, that problem does not apply. So therefore, if you're in construction again, and you're doing something that technically halachically checks all the boxes, but it has a problem of marit ayin, that people will see, oh, say, wait a second, he's working on Shabbat over here. So you can't do it in the middle of the Jewish community, but you could do it outside the tchum. If your business is somewhere that nobody, no Jew lives, basically, and it's completely out, so if a person does it, that will be mutar, as long as, technically speaking, you check all the boxes, and the only issue is the onlooker would think the wrong things. The onlooker, when they're not there because it's outside the tchum, then you don't have that problem, as we explained before. And says the Mishnah Berura, if a person would do it b'shlichut shel Yisrael, if the third problem, that if a person tells the worker, work on Shabbat, because you're my agent now, working on Shabbat, ze isur gamur, says the Chafetz Chaim, that would of course be completely asur. That third problem is always a problem. You can never tell a goy to work on Shabbat. So even if you check all the other boxes, but you end up telling a goy that I want you to work on Shabbat, that of course will be a problem, the shlichut aveju, ואפילו כשעושה בעצמו מלאכה של ישראל בשבילו, גם כן צריך למחות בידו. Not only when you tell him to do a job on Shabbat, it's asur, but even if the goy is doing a work for you on Shabbat without you telling him, you have to stop him from doing that. In other words, if you have a worker at home and he wants to, or she wants to, turn on a light for you because she knows you need it, even though that you didn't tell her to do it, you have to stop them from doing a melacha for you on Shabbat. And if they did do it, you cannot benefit from it, as we will discuss in the days to come. But this is the structure of the Isur. And tomorrow, Be'ezrat Hashem, or next year, Be'ezrat Hashem, will discuss the details of when and when not will apply the rules of Sadeh versus merchatz in modern day and age. What exactly is considered a contractor job and what is considered a worker job is something that we'll discuss and focus on Be'ezrat Hashem in the days to come.